He packs his backpack quickly, throwing his travel bag of toiletries and a clean pair of clothes, wanting to go wherever the warm shower and electricity were as fast as possible. Bakugou does have to stop, however, halfway through throwing things into his bag, as he once more notices the broken lamp at the bedside sitting in shards on the floor. For a moment he thinks of leaving it again, but after a few curses he picks up the broken pieces, happy at least that none of them are very small or overly sharp. The last thing he needs right now is explaining to Kirishima not only why his lamp is broken, but that Bakugou hurt himself further trying to clean it all up. He throws the lamp's remains away in the small trash bin in the room, promising himself to tell Kirishima later when they're alone, when Bakugou can think about what else he might say to him to get him to stop prying so much, to not look at him with stupid fucking sympathy after. And then he's out the door. Bakugou stands with snow up to his waist, glaring. The wetness hasn't seeped in with his snow pants on, but the cold is making his bones shiver. Still, he refuses to move. There's no way in hell he's climbing in there. Apparently, Tetsu is the town's mechanic, and apparently he likes putting modifications on the various trucks and cars he's scavenged and fixed up over the years. The truck he bought to dig them out is altered to have a snowplow attached to the front of the already massive pickup. Bakugou wondered if it's actually safe on the road as soon as he saw it. Just because Kirishima climbed in with no hesitation doesn't mean he's going to. Obviously, it's clear that they're both the same exact kind of stupid, but not trusting the truck is not the reason he is still standing out in the snow. Now who's the one who'll freeze his nipples off? Kirishima grins from the front passenger's window. Bakugou continues to glare, still refusing to move, arms crossed to make a point and to stop his body from shivering too violently in the snow. He's stubborn, and if he's decided to die in this spot, by God he will die right here instead of getting into the back seat of that truck. From said back seat, the two dogs, probably from the same damned litter if the cousins are as predictable as Bakugou might suspect, stare back at him, tongues hanging out, waiting for him to climb up in next to them to drive into town. No way in hell. Bakugou, come on, they're just dogs. Well-behaved good boys who want nothing more than to get pet. Bakugou curls his nose. And lick me. Tetsu leans forward so Bakugou can see him from Kirishima's open window. The sight of him makes Bakugou press his arms tighter to his chest in defiance. Just push him off, bro. Eat shit and die. He isn't Tetsu's bro, and he isn't a dog person. He really isn't a dog person with two big, fluffy, energetic dogs pressed against him in the back seat of a truck smelling like kibbles and bits with their wide-open, panting mouths. Not to mention their damp fur from all the snow they stomped through. Okay. Kirishima puts up his hands in defeat before opening the door to step out, sinking down into the deep snow. It's cool. I'll sit in the back with them. Everyone's happy. Even as Kirishima moves to slide into the back seat, and almost immediately is sat on by both dogs, Bakugou takes note of Tetsu's complete and utter irritation with the situation. He glares as Bakugou finally climbs up into the front seat, nearly slamming the door shut behind him. He turns his gaze back towards Kirishima in the rearview mirror, the anger not as intense in his glare towards his cousin, but there is still a level of frustration in his eyes. He's just as easy to read as Kirishima is, except in the opposite direction it seemed like. They drive in relative silence, at least from Bakugou's perspective. They are easy to drown out once Bakugou's eyes fell across the deep snowy world around them. The barren trees are all covered, the blanket piled high around their trunks as gusts of wind blow around loose flurries from hill to hill. The sun is orange and soft against his skin as he stares, forgetting the chill beyond the warm barrier of the truck for a second. Everything appears quiet as they go, still and undisturbed with not a trace of human or animal to disrupt the world around him just yet. All except for them, driving through, Tetsu's plow creating a road where there isn't one before, following already hollowed out trails when he can. A familiar path that is so unfamiliar to Bakugou, just seeing it all now in the daylight, and still the world is so altered that he isn't sure where he is or where they might be going. He thinks for a second he shouldn't be here. He thinks for a second he wants to be home. Kirishima might have called his name a few times, and Tetsu might have asked a question, but Bakugou ignores them for the trip down into town, not caring about how rude it might be, lost in his own thoughts and direction, wondering, not for the first time, what exactly he's doing here. Thick tree lines slowly thin out, giving way to what he can only assume is the neighborhood they dropped the doctor off all those nights ago. They pass another row of houses, a few closed up and snowed-in storefronts. The journey takes time, the truck moving slowly through the thick white landscape, Tetsu taking the road as quickly as he dares. After 20 minutes, maybe longer, Bakugou sits up in his seat as they turn a wide corner and suddenly enter what he can only assume is the main street or downtown of the small town. The road can't be more than 2 cars wide with little buildings lining both sides. Almost everything is still covered in snow, from the rooftop shingles to the sidewalks. All the little brittle bushes and signs hanging over passes to signal which store is which. Half of the road is already plowed, which tells Bakugou that Tetsu had already been there that morning. With the carved-out path, it's easier to navigate down the narrow street, passing the dark windows of each shop. A bakery, children's clothing store, a bank, and with every window they pass, every little corner and inch of framework of the buildings, decorations are pinned up, taped, stuck on, strings of lights currently dark are around every roof where they poke out from layers of snow. Inside the shops, Bakugou spots garlands, trees. Santa is standing in corners looking creepy and overly happy in the dark. "Oh God," Bakugou whispers under his breath, sitting back, wondering what level of hell he just entered. Kirishima suddenly appears over his shoulder, grinning from ear to ear with his wide eyes. "You haven't seen anything yet." Bakugou doesn't need time to interpret what exactly he means, because suddenly they're making another turn and he can see the sudden sparkle in Kirishima's eyes light up in a rain of rainbow. He whips around, regretting it instantly as he finds himself near blinded by the bright lights twinkling before them. The snow is bad enough with just the sun to shine off of it, but now he squints against the flickering assortment of Christmas lights that line the building before them, wire after wire overlapping from the rooftop, dripping down from gutters and the edges of walls, all flickering in a blaze of rainbow as if the spirit of Christmas had come down to this exact corner of the earth to live for the season. Bakugou is scared to see what they might look like in the dark if it's this bad in the day. As soon as Bakugou can blink the rainbow assortment from his eyes, he notices the sign, half covered by snow still and also bordered with bright Christmas lights, but he can still read it perfectly fine. Ashido Inn and Diner. He glances over at the 2 cousins. Kirishima still pushing forward between the 2 seats, looking giddy over the light display. He looks. "You brought me to a motel?" Tetsu cocks his head at him, looking miffed by the very idea that Bakugou isn't satisfied with it. "Yeah, of course I did. They've still got all their lights on with hot water and warm food. What more do you want?" Bakugou didn't miss the slight bite in his tone, but for now he lets it go. He can't argue when they're delivering everything he requested and more. His skin is still tacky from his workout, and he really wants to wash his hair without icicles appearing on the ends. "Also," Kirishima pauses as Tetsu parks and gets out of the truck, both dogs in the back seat barking far too loud for Bakugou's liking. "Don't let Mina hear you call it a motel, all right? She's not fond of the word." His nose curls. "Who the fuck is Mina?" Kirishima just smiles wider. "She runs the place." If Bakugou thinks the outside is obnoxious, nothing prepares him for the inside of the inn. The little lobby is plastered from wall to wall in Christmas decorations. Each corner of the room carries its own little scene, from plastic deer families bobbing their head to munch on non-existent grass to a whole setup of Santa Claus sitting in a big red armchair with his naughty and nice list in his hands. The front counter is covered in shimmery silver garland, expertly arranged to drape perfectly from corner to corner. Behind the counter is a small radio playing holiday songs through the room, static interrupting here and there as they sing out. And there, right next to the check-in counter, is a Christmas tree that smells heavily of pine and is covered in ornaments. Glass bulbs and little handmade paper stars, cranes, and various other shapes that show the efforts of children's hands with glitter and crayons all over the paper folds. Bakugou stands staring at the scene, covered in clumps of wet snow from the waist down, boots bringing in slush under his feet, frozen to the spot from nothing of the cold conditions in his body is facing. He doesn't know how to react to it all, stomach tightening up as he looks from decoration to decoration, So much more used to the perfectly crafted holiday decor of expensive hotels and resorts or the minimalistic takes his parents would take growing up. A minimum to show they celebrate, but it's never the biggest deal. His own apartment back in the city stood barren of anything related to the holiday besides the tiny little Christmas tree potted and set on his table that Deku insisted on him keeping when he brought it over a week ago. The sharp ding of a bell rips him from his thoughts. Kirishima and Tetsu at the corner, pushing frantically at the bell sitting on its surface.
Mina!
They both call out in unison. A crash comes from the back of the room right behind the lobby counter. Cursing quick to follow, before the door bursts open and a woman with pink hair stumbles through it, 2 presents under each arm. Her eyes are bright and a brown so light that Bakugou isn't exactly sure they look completely natural under the artificial lighting of the inn's lobby, outlined in dark makeup. She wears a colorful sweater, bright blues and purples like an old rug from the 70s, with a clashing animal print scarf around her neck. As soon as she sees the cousins, she gives a shout and nearly jumps over the countertop to hug them as though they haven't seen each other in years instead of what Bakugou can only guess is the few days everyone spent locked inside during the blizzard.
So glad you guys didn't freeze to death.
She pushes them aside relatively quickly to open her arms, peering down.
And my 2 favorite boys.
The pair of dogs bark at her as they do with everyone, it seems, tails wagging a mile a minute as she kneels down to their level and is immediately slobbered all over. It doesn't seem like she minds it as much as she laughs, continuing to pet them both as best she can with only the 2 hands she has. Each dog tries to shove the other out of the way to get the most attention. Bakugou doesn't think they should be inside here in the first place, but supposes it would be cruel to keep them outside in the truck. It takes another few minutes for everything to calm down enough that when Bakugou clears his throat, he's heard. The woman looks up at him, her gaze nearly unsettling as a smile spreads slowly over her lips.
You must be the kept boy.
Kept boy. Kirishima is quick to elbow her.
Mina, be nice.
He hisses too loudly, and all Bakugou can do is roll his eyes as he steps forward, arms crossed in front of him.
This is Bakugou Katsuki, my guest, while the roads are all closed with the snow. Bakugou, this is Ashido Mina.
Her lips curl up at him, hands extending to be taken. Hand extending to be taken.
Nice to meet you, Bakugou.
He stares at it for a second, but doesn't budge to take it.
Sure.
He looks up at her. He doesn't really care to meet more people in this godforsaken town. He can feel roots starting to crawl up his feet any time he stays still for too long to listen.
I was promised a warm shower.
He's shown to one of the rooms in the inn, Mina taking him back outside to trudge through the snow until they come upon the second room down the row. The inn is quiet, vacant, not a soul in sight besides those Bakugou's already seen. He doubts anyone would want to be traveling up here through the storm, besides him, of course. And something told Bakugou if they were coming to stay in this little town, it's to visit family. No need to rent out a room in a motel. The inside of the room looks a little dated, but when he runs his finger over the edge of the desk, it doesn't come away covered in dust. The air smells clean instead of stuffy, and as the doors close behind him, he realizes the inside is warm. He means to make the shower quick when he steps in, but as soon as he's rinsing the shampoo from his hair, gentle on his own head, Bakugou finds himself pausing. He stands with his arms at his sides, still as he watches the soap run from his hair down the drain. Steam fills the shower, the water hot, so much so that he waits until his skin turns pink and the water runs clear of any suds before moving on, blinking himself out of the daze he cast himself in. If given the chance, he thinks, he would stand under the water forever. He's lost in a place that is unknown, yet still welcomes him in. It's an uncomfortable feeling that Bakugou isn't used to, and one that he feels he has to tread lightly in. And yet, Kirishima destroys that feeling. He breaks it all down and grabs Bakugou by the hand, thrusting him into the world and refusing to let him fully drown. Still, he's lost, but at least for now he's warm. Bakugou leaves the shower after scrubbing the sweat from his body, trying not to dwell on any of the thoughts or emotions that bubble up from the drain. He takes his time getting dressed. He looks over himself for the first time, fully in the clear lighting since ending up here, since all the injuries have sunk in. There's some bruising across his chest and down by his waist where the seatbelt cut into him, forcing his body to stop. He's lucky his collarbone didn't break. There's an ache in his shoulder when he rolls it. His head has mostly stopped hurting, even as he pops one more of the pills the doctor gave him 2 days ago. The wound at his head looks to be healing up, as slow as the process is. He cleans it gently, hissing softly as pain flares up, pulsing at the front of his head before it dies down quickly. Bakugou covers it once more with a band-aid, making sure when he fixes his hair his bangs are pushed in front of it as best they can. It won't stay that way, but he's just vain enough to try. Halfway through pulling his shirt over his head, Bakugou realizes just how tired he is. Typically, he's good about sleeping. He knows how important it is, has always been good about going to bed early to get a full 8 hours. Growing up, the only time he ever fought his parents on his bedtime was when he just wanted to start a fight, when slamming the door closed behind him felt better than a good night. It was an empty effort and meaningless, because he was always under the covers by 9 at the latest, asleep very close after that. The nightmares were the first thing he wanted to get rid of after everything that happened. He hated the fact that they were there at all. The one thing he simply couldn't force away or shove down, because his subconscious was far more truthful than his awakened self. He couldn't lie to himself when he was sleeping. He hasn't had them like this in years. Figured he'd left all this back at the beginning of his college days. But here they are back again, all because of this dumb little town. By the time he's done, feeling fresh and put together enough to go face the rest of the world, Bakugou's actually surprised Kirishima hasn't come looking for him to check if he's okay. He doesn't dwell too long on whatever tug that pulls from him. He sort of walks, sort of hops back through the snow, trying to follow the previous footprints still present to make it easier. When he gets there, the lobby is empty except for the 2 dogs laying by some of the decorations, but it's easy to find where everyone else is. Voices being heard through the archway into the little diner attached to the lobby. They're laughing at something, loud and crisp like friends do when they're catching up. He's not certain of it, but Bakugou thinks he's starting to recognize Kirishima's laugh. Deep but still bright, full-bodied so you know he really means it. Kirishima, Tetsu, and Ashido are sitting at the corner, and through the window into the kitchen Bakugou can see someone with dark hair moving around, the sound of oil sizzling in a pan unseen. The smell of bacon, coffee, and tea fills the air, drawing Bakugou in closer along with the laughter. The seat next to Kirishima is open, so he takes it for no other reason than he knows Kirishima the best among the rest of the strangers. A warm mug is pushed into his hands, accompanied by a warm smile. Black, Kirishima tells him, looking proud that he remembers. And I think Sero probably makes a better pot than me. Bakugou doesn't know who Sero is, but he takes a sip anyway. It's not as strong as what Kirishima made him, not as biting with the edge which is barely burned as it hits his tongue. He hates it. He doesn't. Bakugou licks his lips before he takes another sip, not elaborating any further on the matter. He misses how quickly Kirishima turns away from him, how he coughs. Ashido is leaning across the counter before Bakugou can really get a good look at the reaction, hating the woman for making him miss the crimson at his cheeks. So, Bakugou. She has essentially climbed on top of Kirishima to get to him, the other man just holding her up and looking used to it. I hear you're a fireman.
I am.
He mutters out from behind his coffee mug, staring at her with a bored look in his eyes. Being this close, he can see she's wearing Christmas tree earrings dangling from her ears. She smells like pine and peppermint this close up. He wonders just how much Kirishima has mentioned about him. She makes an excited noise in the back of her throat at this, climbing over Kirishima to stand at Bakugou's side. Can you firemen carry me? He snorts into the mug, rolling his eyes.
I can carry any of you.
It's the wrong answer, he quickly realizes, as Mina is insistent on now getting carried around and Tetsu likes a challenge. Bakugou argues, of course, saying it's stupid, but Tetsu smirks, taunts him by saying he can't, that he's just talking out his ass. It gets Bakugou up off of his stool immediately, glaring hard at the other man before he grabs Mina to get her into position. She's an easy lift, her weight balancing across his shoulders and back well. She's light, but still she squeals as she's turned in a circle, kicking her legs against his grip in excitement, making Bakugou put her down quickly in irritation. She's clapping as soon as her feet touch the floor again. Oh, lift Kiri, he's bigger than Tetsu. That's the truth, if only by a little bit, and Bakugou certainly won't argue about it, having not wanted to get personal with the thick-headed rip-off anytime soon. He steps into Kirishima's personal space, grinning from ear to ear. You want me to pick you up? Kirishima shrugs, trying to hide a smile. Can certainly try if you want. Bakugou's never been one to turn away from a challenge, especially one as blatant as that. His heart pounds. Gonna make you eat those words. Kirishima is up close and personal with him right now, closer than he's ever been before, besides when he was carrying him from his rent car. Bakugou can fully appreciate how tall he is when he has to look up to meet his eyes instead of his chin. His shoulders are so damn broad, Bakugou's almost jealous. No one should be allowed to look that good while wearing a knitted sweater, especially when it seems like he should be wearing a size bigger. He smells like the snow outside, and the hint of detergent from his clothes hits Bakugou's nose. The scent floral and light. Everything about him screams big, manly, masculine, and still there are these soft edges that Bakugou can spot that make him want to lean in all the closer, see how comfortable it is to wrap his hands around his neck and lean up. Bakugou grabs his arm and tries really hard not to think about how wide Kirishima's forearms are, bends down to grab his thigh, thinking about how thick they are, strong, how warm Kirishima will be against his back, all tight muscle and large. Should the guy who was just in a car accident really be lifting people like that? They all freeze at the new voice, a far too reasonable voice. The four of them turn to look towards the kitchen door, staring now at a new guy who holds 4 plates of food all balanced on his arms, with a quirked-up brow that spoke more judgment than concern. Slowly, Bakugou lets his hands fall away from Kirishima, trying his hardest not to look disappointed as he feels. He's happy when Ashido doesn't hold back with hers. Aw, Honda, we were just having fun. She pouts, arms crossed tight over her chest as she slides back into sitting on the stool. Kirishima told us he has a concussion, Mina. The man rolls his eyes, putting down a plate in front of the woman, a bowl of rice, bacon, and scrambled eggs all piled high. Leaning down to kiss her head as some sort of apology, Bakugou figures. Ashido still grumbles, but turns her head, asking for another kiss, which is freely given to her cheek. For the moment, it seems, she is stated. Bakugou sits next to Kirishima once more, who also seems to be grumbling his own disappointment under his breath, but as soon as his own plate is put down in front of him, more bacon than anything else, the wide smile returns as his eyes brighten. Thank you, Sarah. Also, Tetsu speaks up. He said it was mild. Sarah rolls his eyes. Bakugou gets the feeling he does that a lot. Still a concussion and still a car accident. He puts a plate down in front of Bakugou, smiling at him from the other side of the counter, a toothy grin seeming to take up half of his face, almost as friendly as Kirishima's own. Sorry for being the buzzkill. I'm Sarah Honta, cook. Ashido slams her hands on the countertop. He's the head chef at the diner. Mina. The best in town, and my fiancé. Sarah's face is red, eyes wide and frantic as he tries to stop her from shouting. Mina, please. Tetsu snorts, pointing with his chopsticks towards the loud woman. Ashido's got her hopes up. There's still no ring and still no wedding date. Ashido huffs, settling back down finally. I'm optimistic. Honta loves me. Still doesn't make you married. They keep bickering back and forth as Tetsu keeps riling Ashido up and she keeps taking the bait. They're hard to drown out, both loud as they snap at each other. Bakugou watches out of the corner of his eye, waiting for one of them to finally clock the other as the conversation crumbles into a full-on fight. Don't worry. Kirishima bumps his shoulder into him, grabbing Bakugou's attention from the pair. At this angle, with both of them sitting at the counter, Bakugou really does need to look up at him. It's infuriating and sends a shot of heat through his stomach all at once. They do that a lot. Mina likes to talk and Tetsu likes to argue. We're all friends, I promise. Bakugou glances back towards the two, no blows having fallen yet, just spit food in between bites it seems.
You guys all seem pretty familiar, huh? He's not entirely sure why he asks, but for some reason he feels the need to know all the connections, how the puzzle all fits together with them and how Kirishima gets shaped around them. We all grew up here. Kirishima starts, shoving a mouthful of rice into his mouth. Mina's parents owned the inn before they retired and passed it on to her. Sero's grandparents started the grocery store here. His older sister mainly runs it now, but his grandma still greets everyone from behind the counter. Obviously, Tetsu's mom and dad grew up here too, so we're all here except... He swallows, looking around the diner for a moment before turning to Sero, who's come out from the back, now carrying a tray with bowls of soup steaming atop them. Hey, Sero, where's Dinky? Where? Sero pauses himself, looking around before shaking his head, sighing heavily. He's probably still sleeping. I think he was up all night talking to the new boyfriend he can't go 2 seconds without mentioning. That automatically gets Mina's attention, leaning towards the three of them with a big grin on her face. His first real boyfriend, and Dinky's acting like he's never dated before. It's adorable. You just love the gossip, love. Maybe I do, but it's about time someone else started dating around here. She huffs, snatching a bowl of soup from the tray, nearly spilling it all over the counter and everyone sitting at it. After Tetsu got married, I need something else exciting to happen. Bakugou nearly chokes on his own mouthful of rice, breathing in a few grains wrong that leads him into a coughing fit that only ends when Kirishima's large hand comes down on his back twice before easing into soothing rub that is entirely unnecessary, as Bakugou isn't a child needing to be burped. Nonetheless, he takes the help and the glass of water that's handed to him after the fit ends. After he takes a sip, Bakugou notices the heavy warmth still pressed against the middle of his back, feeling like a brand burning through his clothes. Kirishima's hands are big, the pressure just enough to feel their expanse, and sit for a few seconds too long before finally falling away from his body. He turns, glaring at Tetsu down the counter. You're fucking married. Tetsu grins back at him. Jealous? Oh, don't worry, Bakugou. Itsuka's way too cool for him. They won't last. Mina teases, tongue out as Tetsu slams his hands on the countertop, growling low at the accusation. Kirishima pushes his way between them, shoving his cousin back down into his seat. Don't be mean, Mina. They're perfect together. But, sorry, Tetsu. She is the coolest person in town. Coming from his cousin, it seems to settle the other, taking the insult as a compliment instead. That's why I married her. Only person who could fix a car better than me. His voice takes on a dreamy tone as he gazes off into the distance, staring at the wall as he shoves 2 pieces of bacon into his mouth. Bakugou curls his nose, still surprised someone would ever want to marry someone like that, especially with a better version so close by. The conversation settles after that as they all eat breakfast. It's anything but silent, but no one is trying to jump over the counters or shouting in anger. There's still plenty of loud laughter and yelling about one thing or another, but it's all in good fun. They talk and Bakugou listens. He only speaks when prompted directly, but most of it is him grunting a yes or no before going back to eating. It doesn't help his feelings of discomfort or misplacement, but he's good at shoving them down too. It sounded like a reunion, even though they all seem to live in the same place they were born and raised in. All 4 of their families have been there at least a full generation, with Ashido's parents being the youngest to have moved into the quiet mountain town right after they were married. They talk about their families, mostly how everyone is, where they all are. Ashido shows pictures of her parents visiting family in America. Sero keeps telling stories of all the times his grandmother had smacked him with a wooden spoon, and Tetsu talks about his own parents out traveling away from the harsh cold for the holidays. All of them talk openly about their families except for Kirishima. He's not quiet, Bakugou notices, always asking questions on how a certain relative is and telling his own stories of the cooking of Sero's grandmother and getting caught doing something stupid they shouldn't have by his uncle or aunt or Sero's sister. It's never overly close or personal, and all of them seem aware enough to know they're not asking, and Bakugou can feel the vibrations in the air to figure out that is entirely on purpose. No one will be so blatant, but they're all reading well enough between the lines. It's not until they're towards the end of breakfast, when everyone's stuffed full and Sero's piling the dishes to take into the back, that Ashido finally nudges Kirishima gently in the arm and asks, "So, how's your brother doing?"
I heard from him and your dad in a bit. Kirishima is good enough to smile and make it look real. He pops the last bit of bacon into his mouth and chews slowly, trying to make it last. He's all right, I expect, he says after a moment, helping to stack up his own dishes to do something with his hands, Bakugou figures. I should actually call him today or tomorrow, check in. I really don't talk to either of them enough. He makes the words sound all kinds of cheerful, like forgetting to talk to your brother and father is a simple mistake anyone could do. But Bakugou can see the concern stretch across everyone else's faces even when they don't say anything. It makes his own stomach churn. Kirishima's good with breaking it all up. Sero, seriously, dude, that was fantastic. Almost as good as what Bakugou made yesterday. Excuse me? Tetsu, we should get going now, yeah? Going. Bakugou slams down his coffee mug. He can relate to avoiding emotions and conversations revolving around them. Where the hell are you going? Oh. Kirishima smiles at him even as he pulls his jacket on and Tetsu whistles for the dogs that had stayed in the lobby to relax. We're gonna go check on everyone else, see what kind of damage happened, if any, and help out if any people are stuck in their houses. You'll be okay here for a bit, right? Just a few hours, promise. He acts like he owes Bakugou something, like he's an actual guest being left behind instead of what is essentially an unwanted stowaway on a ship in open water. Kirishima's just too friendly to kick him overboard. Bakugou rolls his eyes. Course I'll be fine, idiot. Won't be the one running around outside in the freezing cold. I know you will be. Kirishima laughs, mirth in his eyes as he pulls his hat tight over his ears. He leans in close for a moment, a second of hesitation before he pulls back and turns. Bakugou stunned with emotion, staring at his back as he retreats out the door with his cousin and their two dogs already barking and yipping at their heels. Bakugou's not entirely sure what happened, but he swears for just a second Kirishima was leaning in to maybe. Mina, Sero, take care of him for me. The deep voice is thrown back and Bakugou barely hears the sound of the couple yelling back that they will. He stares at the empty space Kirishima once occupied, playing over and over again in his head what just happened, the thought of what might have happened if Kirishima didn't hesitate just then, of what kind of goodbye he would have gotten but didn't receive. Bakugou realizes quickly he's blushing. Motherfucker.